Hello, welcome everybody. This is SharePoint Dev Weekly, episode 26, unless I'm completely mistaken. Waldek, can you confirm? You have no idea, right?
Yeah. Who's keeping track, right?
Yes, but that means that we've been able to actually deliver half a year constantly every single week a new episode. That's pretty cool. So we need to keep on doing in the future as well. Now, this week we once again have a visitor here, and we were able to get Joanne on the call. So, Joanne, we talked about the fact that you're not necessarily a developer, but who are you? And then we can talk about why did we want to have you in the call.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Joanne Klein, and I am a Office 365 and SharePoint consultant. So I run my own company, working for customers that are, some of them are already in SharePoint Online, some just wanting to get there. So I am really focused on SharePoint site and information architecture. I'm usually the SharePoint kind of expert on the team, so they look to me for guidance, how to lay out the sites. But I'm really an end-to-end person, so lots of migrations I work through. So everything from how do you set up your sites, what kind of information architecture do you do there? Once we're in SharePoint Online, then, okay, how do we kind of light up some of those services on that side, just so we can reap the benefits of that migration in the first place. So that's mostly my focus, and I'm kept pretty busy doing that because there's lots of organizations, in that space wanting to get there these days. Yeah.
And obviously the from a developer perspective, it's kind of interesting. This is SharePoint Dev Weekly, but then we wanted to have Joanne here because actually the number one thing to understand as a developer is what's available out of the box. So you wouldn't actually implement the exact same capabilities, or you wouldn't forcefully bend SharePoint or Microsoft 365 platform to a direction where it doesn't actually should be where it shouldn't be going, right?
Yes.
Waldek, you had an awesome statement related on this one.
Yeah. So thinking
kind of thing.
Well, yeah, exactly. So the power to dev is also the power not to dev, as you say, right? It's all about the thing like knowing when is the right time and what is the right place to build stuff, and where you should be thinking about, well, maybe there's a reason things are the way they are. Maybe there are things that are coming. Maybe there are things that I'd love to build just don't make sense. Maybe it is not worth the effort to have the button move it from right to left and then spend every day trying to check if it's still there, because maybe there's something changed about the DOM or on something else.
Yeah, that's why I think it's really important for someone on the team to kind of be on top of what's coming down the pipe, what's there. So when we get these requests on the team, and we always get them, I don't like how thing X works or looks, can you change it, please? So I like to have kind of a pragmatic discussion with our developers, because they'll always want to jump in and build that thing.
Of course.
Sometimes it doesn't make sense to do that. Either the juice isn't worth the squeeze, or it's coming down the pipe, or whatever the reason is. But you really need someone to keep on top of that, so you aren't spending all of your cycles developing things that really aren't giving that business value. Let them focus on the things that they really need to focus on, custom modern web parts or whatever that is.
Yeah. So are you the person on the team that asks why? Like, I like this. Yes. Why? Why would you want it? And then it makes them think, and they're like, that's actually good question.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think every team needs to have one of those, and
absolutely.
Everyone should be looking through it through that lens. Does this really make sense? And yeah, it's you kind of have to challenge that request in the first place. Many are legitimate business requests, and you have to respond accordingly. But it's to kind of know which is the right response. Takes a little bit of experience to know kind of which avenue to take from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you think about larger projects, which I used to do before I joined the engineering, we used to have a business analyst in the project, and the role of business analyst was to understand really what's coming and what's out of the box and all of that. And then we used to have the technical architect, which was then the fun, which is actually understanding that, okay, we business analysts said that this is not coming, we should implement that. So the technical architect was responsible of defining how do we implement. And then we have the developers who are in the API level.
So which one was you? Were you the analyst? Were you the architect or the dev?
I switched the roles in my career of being a consultant. I started as a developer and then ended up as a technical dictator. Right? Technical dictator, actually. So it depends.
No, we're not doing this.
No, well, I'm a big believer personally, and this might be something which we don't want to even record. No, it's fine. But I'm a big believer in every single larger project. We should have the final one dictator in quotes, who has the final ruling. So it's you can have a team of, let's say, 15 developers or 10 developers doing whatever they want to. There has to be a joint agreement between the business owners, like the business analyst, and then the technical architect, and then they agree, and whatever the teams is doing is useful based on that decision. If it's a joint-owned team and a massive project, I don't think
nobody's doing anything. No.
Exactly. You need to have the one person which is making the final decisions on this is what we do. So
yeah, I agree.
Good.
Good. And I thought that we would be really controversial. Like we would spend like 2 days talking about.
No.
I agree. Next.
Yeah.
So, John, just out of curiosity, you're clearly based on Canada, unless that's a promotion or something else.
Not at all.
Yes, I'm based out of Western Canada, the province of Saskatchewan. So really cold this time of year. We're in our typical 2-week cold snap. So yeah, it's pretty cold here.
What's cold in Canada? Just looking outside, having snow and everything. So
today it's minus 21 Celsius with wind chill minus 34 Celsius. So it's
that's
cold.
That's cold. That's cold.
That's proper cold.
Yeah.
That's proper cold. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Seattle is having massive problems right now as well. I don't think, well, we're recording this on Monday, 11th of February, and what was a Snowmageddon, our second Snowmageddon right on Sunday. So most likely today on Monday, there won't be that many people in campus. And then Tuesday, when this goes live, hopefully the weather is heading to the right direction, but we'll see. Yeah. The Seattle just haven't been built for the snow. It just doesn't work like that.
The pictures, there was a lot of snow there. Yeah, that's going to be mayhem on the roads, I think.
I think that as long as things clear by mid-March, I'm good.
Yeah.
MVP Summit is coming.
Yes.
Cool. Now, let's actually jump, just conscious about the time as well. Let's jump on the articles and then come back on and have a discussion in the end as well. And let's have a discussion on the topics related on the articles. So let me share my screen and continue the discussion from there. It is that screen. Hopefully I got it right. And I think I got.
Building Office 365 portals in PHP. That's an interesting read.
What?
What? Oh, that was the other screen you shared.
Yeah, that would be actually interesting. Why not? Anyway, so you can probably see what I'm sharing, right? We have SharePoint Saturday Cairo coming up on this week. So February 16th, it is February 11th. It's insane how fast time is flying. So it's a Valentine's Day is on this Thursday, right? We will have a SharePoint framework community call on that day as well. So let's see if we'll have some special announcements there. We'll see. Anyway, SharePoint Saturday Cairo is in this Saturday. So that's for those who are in area and are interested in going over. It is apparently in Microsoft Egypt, and location is in here. Speakers and sponsors and sessions listed on the SPC event site. Now, on Joanne's topic, so this one was your new article, which came out yesterday, actually, yes, 10th of February. And this was around anatomy of a SharePoint migration. And it was really a infograph which you created related on what to do and what not to do. Do you want to kind of walk through the main thinking points around this one?
Sure. This is based on many migrations that I've done working with organizations. So we kind of take a team-by-team approach. And although it's not cookie cutter, there's some basic things that we do over and over and over again. And this kind of is my recipe for success, if you will. So I think my biggest takeaway on the plan stage is this is not a lift and shift approach. There's no way you can do this by, well, you technically can, of course, but I don't think you're going to reap the benefits of moving to Office 365 if you take a lift and shift approach, going from some legacy system into SharePoint Online. So, you know, you meet with teams. We have a team of about, I want to say 8 people working on one of my main clients right now, migrating everybody's shared network folder location into SharePoint Online in some kind of a collaboration space. So we're going team by team, meeting with them, you know, kind of identifying their processes that they have. And this is where eventually, when we're into SharePoint Online and some of the other features in Office 365, we start bringing in the devs to, you know, automate some of those things. It might be everything from, you know, some of the Microsoft Flow or Power Apps, or it might be something more advanced than that. So this is the plan stage is kind of where we go through all of that. And of course, design the site and information architecture, which is, you know, the underpinning for everything. And you need to have somebody on your team that knows what they're doing in that space. So later on, when the devs come in, they like what they see and they have something good that they can work with, and that's scalable.
Yep.
So the execute phase is basically just the you know, technical, let's get whatever content you have into SharePoint Online. So you know, there's lots of really good migration products on there. I know Microsoft has one of their own as well. And just, you know, a few things roadblocks you can run into on that step. But all in all, that's a pretty streamlined process. And it's, you know, figuring out also what you're building for the team. So is it a Microsoft Teams? Is it a Yammer group? Is it just a straight up, you know, modern team site with no group backing it? Is it a comm site? What is the thing that you're building? Yeah. And then the next phase is you're in SharePoint Online. So there's lots of pieces on this part. This is where the security and the protection and the retention controls come in, which is, you know, one huge aspect, one big benefit to being in Office 365. But then you start to be able to automate some of those business processes. So like I said, have a conversation with your dev team and you know, walk through those business processes and figure out what you can do for the team. Yeah, and, you know, of course, incorporating training and adoption, that part never ends, that kind of thing. So it's basically my do's and don'ts on those 3 steps. And you know, certainly it's not inclusive because, as you probably are both aware, every migration is unique and usually has some, you know, one-off scenario that makes it so it's not really a cookie cutter approach, and you have to deal with that. But by and large, these are, you know, 3 steps that I take that are successful in the long run.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, from a developer perspective, just pinpointing a few things as well. So obviously, as part of the migration, I think personally, I always consider that people should be considering of leaving the old customizations behind, because if you're moving from on-premises, the techniques are completely different. So trying to forcefully do something which, for example, massive custom branding in which you had in on-premises, trying to make that forcefully happen in SharePoint Online is not worth of the investment. Technically, potentially, you would be able to do that, but it gets insanely complicated, and the costs are enormous as well. So it's much better to actually concentrate on getting the content over, getting the content and the site collections and the kind of a day-to-day work over to the SharePoint Online.
Yes.
And I like the fact that it's not take a lift and shift approach, because I think the fact that a lot of customers are moving the model where they just suddenly zipped that all of the new site collections are getting created in SharePoint Online, old will still remain in on-prem, and then gradually move over the stuff.
Yes.
what's kind of cool about that approach, we've seen as well, is that a lot of the customer organizations which are then in on-premises start being jealous about those teams which actually moved over, and they're willing to do manual migration. So they're basically I can go there as long as I get the stuff over. And I'm sure there are exceptions if you have a massive site collection and I need to actually do automation and all of that. So sure, but it's always one-off things, and like you said, it's always a challenging thing, and there's always customer-specific things. There will never be a click a button migration because it's SharePoint, unfortunately.
That's right. It also gives an opportunity, which I always do, is to flatten up that architecture. You know, usually if you're coming from a SharePoint on-prem environment, usually, or even another online environment, if you've done a deep hierarchy where you have subsites, a migration like this is an excellent opportunity to flatten that out.
Yep, revisit the designs, revisit the customization, revisit the requirements, and because quite often those requirements were defined 5 years ago and based on business models which might have evolved already. So going through that as well, and also I like the fact that you're raising here the next as well, because really now that you're investing on SharePoint Online, you're already paying for the SharePoint Online and Office 365. So why wouldn't you actually take advantage of all of the capabilities which are available? So really do not forget about understanding what's available. Sorry, Waldek, I jumped on your comment there.
Oh, no. So the only thing that I wanted to add is that, especially when you think about apps, there's often the notion like, okay, we had it on premises, so we have to have that online too. But then you might realize that just because it's there doesn't really mean it's being used, and that's often one of the things that people lack insight into. Are things actually being used? Does it make sense to invest time and effort into trying to either change that, transform that, move it as is if you can, or just leave it behind because nobody is doing anything with that anyway?
Yeah. Good point.
So kind of going through the existing catalog of customization, then analyzing, and then potentially do a high-level T-shirt estimate on, okay, so getting this capability to SharePoint Online, is it a short, small, medium, extra large, or whatever?
And then European small, American small.
That's true. There are differences in that as well. But again, evaluating the investment, evaluating the value of the investment is insanely important, rather than just jumping on things and forcing things to customize. Back in, when was it? A few years back, we were executing these programs where we helped our dedicated customers moving from the farm solutions to adding model. And as part of that transition, there was an interesting discussions with the largest companies in the world, because they were in dedicated platform where we used to support farm solutions, but then they were forced to move to adding model. And having that discussion on, no, have you considered this is actually used? Have you considered the value of this capability? Oh, we have no idea. And then it would have cost 50,000 to actually get it on cross or whatever.
Yeah, but that's actually the whole point, right? Because I think it is much more complex to get the usage and to understand the value than just to say, you know what, we had this, it kind of does that, so let's write a spec and then we will estimate the time and effort to do it, and then we know exactly how much time it costs, and then we can do it. As otherwise you would just like sit and plan and try to think, okay, is it being used? Who's using that? Interview people, like from the people who are technologically inclined would be more willing, I guess, to just defer to the technical approach as opposite to try to investigate and plan, because it seems like not doing work.
Yeah. But that's really important work, right? It's
absolutely, because in the end, it decreases also the effort to maintain, to operate that. Correct. Right, but it's a long-term thinking and not like here and now, let's build this thing because we had it here, so we have to have exactly the same thing here.
Yep. Absolutely. Cool. So really good blog post sharing the learnings as well. And not obviously, I like the blog posts which are not necessarily super long, because then obviously long ones are good if they're kind of a catalog of and this is how you actually make stuff happen. But this is providing significant amount of value with the screenshot, or well, not a screenshot, as a picture. And I can imagine that you have a conference sessions related on this content as well, right?
Books, t-shirts, everything. mugs.
Yeah, there's so much to cover in a session like this, but I have done it before, and usually it's very well attended because there's lots of people trying to figure out how to do this.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're still on the journey of getting customers to the SharePoint Online. Yes, there's a massive usage and it's growing usage, but still there's a lot of people who are still in on-premises and looking into moving. And that's why we are also investing on the migration platform in Microsoft side, so, and the tooling as well.
And I guess cool. Even though you might be already on 365, well, there's also the next steps. What can you do more with the tools available there, which you did not have available on premises?
Sure.
Oh, for sure. That's where the value add comes in for why you went there in the first place. And that's usually what your executive team, the group that has sponsored the move in the first place, are really looking for, right? Like our data will be much more secure, or, we can mitigate risk by having, retention applied across our content, or whatever the thing is. So there's lots of things you need to kind of be working on once you get there.
Yep. Cool. Awesome article and awesome content. Absolutely to consider. Now, moving on to the other articles as well. So let's actually go through. We did a sub-selection of, again, developer-oriented topics. So this one was from Thomas Berman, SharePoint Online PMP PowerShell provisioning using Flow and Azure Automation. Sounds insanely technical, but basically what it is that it's using the site designs and site scripts, and then if that's not sufficient, then we're extending that using the PMP provisioning engine. Just out of curiosity, Joanne, are you familiar with the PMP provisioning engine and the PMP PowerShell stuff?
I am.
Where is your limits? Cool.
Yes, I am. I've used it a little bit. I do have a dev background from a ways back. So yeah, I always like to get in there and make sure I understand, at least at a high level, what's going on there. It's great.
Yeah, because that helps again on having that discussion with the developers and the technical people on defining what's available. Absolutely. Yeah. So this one is a quite long article, but this is explaining really well on step-by-step what you need to do to be able to extend the site designs and site scripts, then using the PMP provisioning engine. And I think it's actually using the latest, which means the PMP tenant templates in the end. Which it's applying PMP provisioning template to the actual site. So which is relatively typical setup what customers are doing when they need to do something what the site designs do not yet support. So obviously we recommend people using site designs and site scripts, but then you're able to fall back on the PMP models and the PMP provisioning engine if your business requirements are different than what is supported out of the box. Now, site designs and site script is kind of an interesting discussion. Is that development, or is that IT Pro, or what is it? Because it's JSON definitions, right? So it falls on the category and between.
Yeah. But I guess it is. Yeah. Go on.
Sorry, I was going to say I think that depends who you ask. Likely.
Yep.
But I guess it is. Yeah, it is. It is the same thing, right? It's like where do you draw the line? Is PowerShell, is that dev or admin? You can do both in.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. Sure. I think the PowerShell was just a Microsoft scam forcing every IT pro to learn development.
Might as well be.
Yes. And we've been pretty successful in that, so that's pretty cool. So I have to say this, a while back, was it in 2009 or whenever, 2009, 2010, first time when I met Mark Cashman was in Amsterdam. It was Ignite 2010 the training where we actually introduced the PowerShell first time for SharePoint. And that was an interesting movement from SDS ADM to the PowerShell.
Oh, right. Huh. And then there was one thing that you couldn't do with PowerShell. There was the exec deployment. So to deploy a package, you had to use the SDS ADM min-o exec ADM SVC jobs.
Yeah.
Yep. And you couldn't do it in PowerShell.
That is true.
Wow.
Nowadays, luckily, PowerShell is the by default scenario. You should not use SDS ADM. Yeah, we should probably stop doing this. We're too old, kind of memorizing that old stuff, what happened back in 2010. Nobody can relate on that anymore. So, well, maybe they can.
Yeah, people in this call can. Joanne,
Yeah.
right? There you go.
Yeah,
exactly.
I built a whole SharePoint 2013 farm in PowerShell only. So
Yep.
Wow.
yeah,
Did it hurt?
yeah, a little bit.
Luckily, all of that is fully automatic in SharePoint Online nowadays, right? So you don't have to worry about anything. It's just magically up and running. So
on.
It's on, indeed. Well, obviously, there's a lot to be configured after that still. So the business hasn't really gone away, but still.
Yeah.
Now, moving on things. So this one is relatively new. So this came out yesterday as well. I noticed this morning. So graffiti guidance, which sounds like a what? Advice on using unsupported customizations and more in SharePoint Online environment. And this relates on a discussion which I had with Stefan Bauer in the SharePoint Dev Weekly. I think 2 weeks ago or something like that. We talked about the 3M intranet, and we realized that the 3M intranet actually is using DOM injection. And DOM injection basically means that you're hacking the HTML in the page because you couldn't achieve the business requirements or the UI branding requirements using whatever capabilities Microsoft is providing for now. And that was a kind of a discussion on, is it acceptable? What do you need to do if you do that? Shouldn't you be doing that? And so it's kind of a yes and no and on a gray area on those things. And this is kind of an interesting discussion on the fact that if you allow one, then it's almost the same as allowing two, allowing three, allowing more than that. And then you're eventually in the situation where you start allowing this more and more, which will cause you additional costs in the long run. So sure, potentially you can do DOM injection, you can relocate, for example, search box to somewhere else in the UI, but is it actually worthwhile? Is it something which you really want to do? Because then every single Monday or every single Wednesday or Thursday when we push out new versions of SharePoint Online, you need to go and double check that the UIs are still working. Or what if the text box is completely gone? And then your customers are angry because your solution isn't working anymore. So. And that's really why we in the engineering, we're trying to provide the needed capabilities using, in quotes, I personally, I don't like this terminology, but we call it a railed experiences. So extending SharePoint using railed experiences. And what it means is that
on the rails, not
on rails.
On the rails.
On rails. That's a good one. But what it means is that we give you the extensibility points where we allow that this is what you can do, but don't do anything else. And we are missing some placeholders. We're missing still some extensibility points, which we'll be adding in the future. Absolutely. So that's one of the things what we're investing on this spring. Anyway, good article around that gray area discussion. Now, the second article around site scripts and site designs from Ahmad, and this is really around what they are and how they actually work and what's being exposed. So here we have a custom site design visible, and which then associates to the site scripts and called a Christmas template in this case. So you as a tenant administrator or as a tenant administrator can define what are the templates which are available for your sites and how do you make them, how do you save them, and all of that using then PowerShell to your tenant. So quite nice introduction on the topic itself. Good. Moving on things from Sergey, SharePoint Framework Development Tips, Predefined imports, and this is really around the picture actually tells that quite nicely. So that looks ugly, that looks nicer, right? So we're basically just referencing, creating an alias and referencing to the path.
Well, I mean, the ugliness is one, but I think on the other hand, from the practical point of view, you could say when you move things around in the example above, you will need to adjust all of these paths, whereas below you have an alias, you change it in a single place and it applies consistently across the whole code. So yeah, it's also that.
Yep. And this one quite nicely, actually, it shows the both. It shows the source, and then there's another alias, which is the Hello World component. So now this way, if you move all of the components in your solution to another folder, you can just update the alias. Yep. And like you said, so makes sense. So absolutely. Cool. Moving on things, Chris Kent has been showing quite a lot of list formatting tips. He's an awesome developer in SPFx as well, and well, he can present anything pretty much. But the list formatting has kind of fallen on the hands of Chris, and he loves that. And he's been doing the recurrent demos in the bi-weekly SharePoint Dev community course as well, which is around, what was it? It's the war horses every single time, which is
a common theme.
Common theme of these things. But basically, what this blog post is all about is around a new actions which are available. So index off, and you're able to then do rules and rendering rules related on the index of entry, which is really useful. So you're able to basically then do an indication, is there certain text available. Slightly weird use of a terminology, stable, heated, unsupported. But anyway.
Oh. Well.
Yeah. So
whatever floats your boat, right?
That's true. The additional actions to lowercase is there as well. He did a great demo on this one in the last community call as well. And there's a video on that one that's going to be released tomorrow, Tuesday, actually, 12th of February. So that's pretty cool as well. Now, moving on again on topics, list pivot table or web part. So this is around building a custom web part, which is then showing a pivot table from, I'm not going to say this, Waldek. What was the right way?
João Mendes.
João Mendes, thank you.
Yeah, we had one João a while back on our call, and that was when I learned like the right way to say it. And I think
yes. Yeah, that's good. So this one is basically a custom web part rendering then a pivot table. In this case, it is also in the Teams, inside of the Teams tab. So because as part of the SharePoint framework 1.7 forward and from 1.8 in GA, you're able to implement any custom web part to be exposed using the Microsoft Teams as well. Well, technically, I wouldn't actually. Let me rephrase that. You're using SharePoint framework, which will be renamed to something else, maybe Office 365 framework at some point, to build a solution, and then you're able to expose that in Teams or as a web part. So, so you decide, is it a Teams tab or is it a web part, or actually is it or is it a single page, a single part app page in the future, which is something which I'm going to show this Thursday.
Add-in or whatever.
No, there's three options. No, there's three options in 1.8.
Today.
Yeah. In 1.8, there's going to be three options.
Yes.
Microsoft Teams tab, SharePoint web part, or a app page.
Yep.
And the app page thing is a new thing, by the way, but that's coming relatively soon. Woo. Now, obviously, this is a good example of the capabilities. That is this functionality or the rendering here adding on top of the quick chart web part. So you might actually make a kind of a evaluation. Is it worthwhile of having a custom web part here, or is it the out of the box quick chart web part good enough for the scenario? What are we doing? So obviously that doesn't have a pivot table available, but still. So what is the main thing? Why are you exposing these things? That's the why question, right?
Yeah.
Data. Because data.
Because of the data, yes. But why is the data there? Where is the data coming? Next article from Anup, work on change to look options in REST API. So this is something relatively new. The change to look options were rolled out worldwide last week. Was it for technical? Was it for the preview tenants? John, do you remember? We rolled out like this last week. Is it for worldwide availability or is it for targeted release? I think it's targeted release, actually.
I think so too. Yeah. I have it in one of my tenants and not in the others. So
yeah, there you go.
Yes. Anyway, they're now getting rolled out to targeted release, and then if there's no surprises, then to the GA relatively soon. So, and this relates on the header and the header sizing and the background and navigation. And what Anup has done is basically reverse engineered the REST calls which the out-of-the-box capabilities are using to set these things. So we haven't documented technically these REST APIs. We're looking into potentially doing that, so they will be officially supported as well. Unless they're documented, technically the feature crew can change the API implementation, and that's always a challenging thing. So because that might break whatever you are building on top of the REST API. So But anyway, it's walking through the different options in REST. Now, be schizophrenic at the Debugging SPFx 2 from Yannick. So this is really around the fact that you're able to guidance on how do you set up Chrome debugging against multiple profiles. I wasn't aware that you can actually do this, and this is really cool. So, because I at least have like 25 different profiles in my Chrome. So. And this is relatively long article, but it really goes down on the fact that how do you do this in practice? How do you modify your default settings and launch options and all of that? So really cool stuff. And then the final here, before we go back on the closing discussion, this was from Ayash Hassan, relatively. I haven't seen him actually blocking. I think it's a new blocker, which is great as well, and a SPFx image gallery. Web part and providing the source for this one as well. So there's a taxonomy-based filtering for the web part as well. There's a search on it as well, and then there's source code is available as well, so which is really cool.
Cool.
Good. That's it for now, and we probably missed plenty of nice articles what community is building. We do apologize on that. Please use the SPFx Dev Weekly hashtag for getting your stuff noted, or you can do your normal tweeting and then do a reply and add our hashtag or whatever. So we'll catch your blog posts.
Dear Vesa,
don't send me emails. So, well, you know this because you sent me emails earlier today. Right now,
even two emails.
Yes, you're getting automatic reply of 429s from my.
Yeah,
email.
but that's only because I am not in Teams anymore.
Oh, you're not? What?
Well, yes, because I was removed because of the whole account thing.
Oh, that's a good point. Good that we got this recorded. We'll need to work on that actually later today, so we'll get you sorted out. Good point, actually. Good. Now, any last words? Joanne, what are you planning to do this week? Are you any conferences coming up? Are you flying or working customer cases?
I am working with a couple different clients this week. I'm doing more migrations, more team migrations. We're actually working, building a project site template. So we're just trying to decide if the requirements will allow us to stick with site scripts and site designs, or if we're going to have to go into PMP provisioning. So we're actually
exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. So yeah, that, and really I don't have any upcoming travel plans except for MVP Summit, which I'm totally stoked about. That'll be awesome. And then I'm speaking, of course, at SharePoint Conference, but that's not till May. Yeah.
I will be there in the MVP Summit as well. Well, of course, presenting and looking forward on that one. And no travel before it. Yes. Nice. Because that means that you can actually concentrate on delivering stuff and making stuff happen rather than traveling always takes time.
That's right. It does. And it's, I don't know, I like to be boots in the ground, actually getting work done and learning stuff. So yeah, it's all good.
What about you, Waldek? Any new stuff, except that we need to fix your Microsoft Teams access to our...
Oh yeah, that will be one. Then I'll be able to do things again.
That's why you were sending all of those emails to me today, which I didn't read. So
why else would I do it? Why else would I? Like, what was the last email you got from me before that?
That's fair. That is
exactly. Well, other than that, so last week we had a new beta release of the CLI. We had 8 PRs, which was like really cool to go through, and then we're looking into some more things. Like, for example, the other week we've seen that there's now ability to create Microsoft Teams based on templates. So that's also interesting ability, and I wonder, how does that compare, for example, to site design site script? Is that a similar approach or not? What do they do there? I'm looking to learn more about that.
Yep. That was, I think it was released a preview last week, unless mistaken.
Exactly.
I think Thursday timeframe. So that's a good point. That's something what we're looking into doing in the PMP provisioning templates, tenant provisioning templates as well. So having a capability of able to define that I want to provision also teams and these channels and these tabs and pointing them back on the SharePoint side, which is getting provisioned from the template as well. So that you can actually create an end-to-end Microsoft, Office 365 scoped template, and then have a repeatable way of applying that in. Really cool stuff. Obviously, I'm just I really don't have that much time anymore. More write on that actual code. So Paula and Irvin and Bert are the main people writing that. So. Which to say, it would be so much fun to have some time to write some stuff.
Well, but I guess so. Soon there will be the 1.8 release of SPFx, right? So that will give you an excuse to revisit all the tutorials and manuals.
Yes, which is always so much fun.
But it is, right?
Well,
You'll be able to code again.
That is true, even though it's the basics, but that's fine. That's fine. And we need to refresh all of the documentation anyway, which is always fun. But it's something which we absolutely need to do now that the SPFx usage is off the roof, and people need to have simply reliable tutorials to learn how to do stuff. So absolutely makes sense. Now, we still have a few minutes. One thing related on documentation, I almost said it before, with Joanna, related on the business analysts and architects. And this is something, I know that we can't solve this right away, but maybe we just need to keep on the topic on the discussions. But isn't it actually kind of funny when I think about Microsoft and our documentation? We always consider that people are always either devs or IT pros. Mm-hmm. And then we never actually concentrate on the middle section, or then we don't actually combine these things. And that's, we kind of always missed the support for governance and the business analyst stuff. We just don't have it. Yeah,
I think that's maybe the niche that me and many others are filling in the actual some practical how-to use case examples of how some of this stuff is, can be deployed in your own organization. So I think that kind of fits in that middle zone. Yes, you can, technically implement it this way, but how should you design it, and what are some, ways you can roll that out in your organization? That's a pretty important piece in the middle. And, different people are, varying degrees of success. They have done that. So I think the community has kind of stepped forward in that missing piece, if you will.
Absolutely.
Well, I wonder to what the degree it's easier for non-Microsoft people to do it, because it depends. There is no one way to do things at that degree. So as such, you can give your opinion, but being the Microsoft, like we don't want to actually guidance that applies to everybody, and you cannot do it simply.
But wouldn't it make sense, and I'm just throwing this one out there and then we can close, wouldn't it make sense for us as a Microsoft to kind of fund an effort where we actually start collecting all of the solution designs as a one source? I don't know what that source would be, but trying to find the right MVPs, trying to find the right people, and trying to define kind of the high-level governance and solution design in that level as well. Some of that
bombshell. See you next week.
Exactly. I think we are on this call. We are in conclusion that it would make sense, but let's see if we can actually make that happen at some point, because I think that is a missing link, and that would drive then adoption even more significantly in the SharePoint Online. So people understanding what you can actually do, not just technical details.
Yeah.
But I think that's it for this one. So thank you, Joanne, for joining us and raising the importance of solution designs and governance and everything else, and keep on doing that, because I think that is really the key for the success of SharePoint Online as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.